All right, ready to dive deep into heavy metal.
Mm.
We're going to explore the life and the legacy of a musician who uh, might not be a household name, but totally shaped the sound of the genre.
Looking forward to.
Yeah, I'm excited too. One of those figures. Their influence echoes through the music, even if you don't immediately recognize their name.
For sure.
We're talking about Paul Dano, the original lead singer for Iron Maiden.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. Sadly, he passed away recently at 66.
Yeah, I saw that.
The New York Times did a really great piece covering his life and career. We'll touch on some excerpts from that, but what I'm really pumped about for this deep dive is his autobiography, The Beast.
That's awesome.
Getting to hear his story in his own words is just gold.
Can't beat that.
No, you can't.
Okay.
So one thing that struck me right away reading the New York Times piece, alongside Dano's own writing, is this sharp contrast.
Yeah.
So you've got early Iron Maiden with Dano at the mic, raw, almost punk sound.
Right.
But later, with Bruce Dickinson, they became much more polished, almost operatic. What do you think that shift tells us about how heavy metal itself was evolving back then?
Well, it's fascinating, isn't it? Dano's era really captures a specific moment in heavy metal's history. Think about it. Late 70s, early 80s, punk is exploding. There's this energy of rebellion.
Right.
Diana's Iron Maiden tapped right into that. It wasn't just music, it was an attitude.
Yeah.
Now, Dickinson brought incredible vocal range, technical skill when he joined later.
For sure.
That definitely helped Iron Maiden reach a much wider audience. But Diano's voice, you could hear that punk, snarl, raw, unfiltered aggression. That was the sound of heavy metals, like rebellious youth.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's like hearing that raw energy leaping off the vinyl.
Exact.
Speaking of rebellious youth, there's this great story in Dano's book about him skipping school to see AC/DC just as they were about to hit it big. Yeah. This was the same period when Iron Maiden was first starting out.
Oh, wow.
What does that shared context tell us about the music scene they were both coming out of?
I think it paints a picture. AC/DC, early Iron Maiden, riding this wave of youthful rebellion that was surging through music in the late 70s and early 80s.
Yeah.
That feeling of discontent, this urge to break free from the norm, these bands, they gave a voice to that feeling.
Totally.
It was loud, it was raw, and it was exactly what a generation was hungry for.
So it's interesting, though, because alongside that image of Dano as this like punk-infused metalhead, the New York Times article paints this kind of different picture, too.
Okay.
They have this caption of the band looking almost boyish just walking through a park.
Uh-huh.
So how do we reconcile those two seemingly different images of the same person?
It's a classic example of the duality that you see in artists,
Yeah.
especially in a genre like heavy metal, where image and performance are so crucial.
Right.
Think of it like this. The onstage persona is often a carefully constructed image, a way to channel a certain energy, connect with the audience on a visceral level.
Yeah.
But offstage, the individual might be completely different. The contrast you're talking about highlights how powerful performance can be in shaping how we perceive an artist.
For sure.
It's a reminder that there's often more to the story than what we see on the surface.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Okay, so we've got Dano, this punk-influenced metalhead, fronting a band that would become legendary.
Right.
But here's where things get really interesting. In his book, Dano says the very first time he saw Iron Maiden play before he joined them, he thought they bloody stank to high heaven.
Oh, wow.
What made him join a band he initially disliked so much?
That is the million-dollar question, isn't it? It suggests that Dyo saw something beneath that rough exterior, some kernel of potential that wasn't fully formed yet.
Yeah.
Maybe he recognized shared musical goals, or maybe he sensed an opportunity to shape their sound, bring his own unique energy to the mix.
Right.
It's a good reminder that even the most iconic bands often start from humble and, let's be honest, sometimes pretty terrible beginnings.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's mind-blowing to think about how different things could have been if he just walked away. Speaking of walking away, let's talk about Dano's eventual exit from Iron Maiden. The New York Times piece and his autobiography both mention that he was aware of his own limitations as a vocalist.
Okay.
He didn't blame the band at all for moving on. And in a music industry that's notorious for big egos, that's pretty unusual.
Absolutely. That level of self-awareness and acceptance is incredibly rare,
Yeah.
especially in a genre like heavy metal where, let's just say, personalities can be strong.
Yeah.
It shows a real maturity. Recognition that not every singer is the right fit for every era of a band's sound.
Right.
And honestly, it probably helped make the split a lot less acrimonious than it could have been.
Yeah, it seems like he really had a good grasp of the bigger picture, both for himself and the band.
Definitely.
Even though his time with Iron Maiden was relatively short, his impact on the band and the genre as a whole is undeniable.
Yeah.
But before we get too far ahead of ourselves, let's rewind a bit and talk about Dyo's early life. The New York Times article mentions he was born Paul Andrews in East London in 1958. And his autobiography, The Beast, talks about how he was drawn to music from a young age.
Mm-hmm.
There's even that story about him skipping school to see AC/DC before they made it big.
Oh, yeah.
What do you think that little detail tells us about him?
I think that little vignette's just perfect. It shows that even before Iron Maiden Dyo was drawn to that raw energy, that rebellious spirit of rock and roll,
Yeah.
skipping school to catch a band on the verge of breaking through,
Right.
it speaks to a sense of adventure, a desire to be part of something exciting and new. And let's not forget, it also shows he had a good ear for talent.
Yeah.
Recognizing AC/DC's potential at that stage suggests a real understanding of what connects with an audience.
It's like he had this intuitive sense of what would resonate with people, which obviously served him well in his own musical career.
For sure.
But what I find fascinating is that his first impression of Iron Maiden wasn't exactly positive.
Okay.
In his book, he says that when he saw them play for the first time, he thought they bloody stank to high heaven.
Oh, wow.
Not exactly a ringing endorsement, is it?
That's hilarious, right? You wouldn't expect a future frontman to be so blunt about his initial opinion of the band.
Yeah.
But I think it speaks to his honesty and his discerning ear. He wasn't afraid to call it as he saw it. Even if it meant criticizing the band, he would later lead to success.
It's true.
What do you think made him change his mind?
That's what I'm dying to know.
Yeah.
What shifted for him? What made him go from thinking they stank to seeing their potential?
It's the big mystery, isn't it? Maybe he saw something in their raw energy that resonated with him, even if the execution wasn't quite there yet.
Right.
Or perhaps he sensed a shared passion, a drive to create something powerful and unique. It's also possible he simply saw an opportunity to shape their sound, to bring his own rebellious energy and vocal style to the mix.
Yeah.
Whatever the reason, it's clear that his initial assessment didn't stop him from recognizing the potential simmering beneath the surface.
And thank goodness for that.
Right.
Imagine a world without that raw, gritty sound of Dyo-era Iron Maiden.
It really makes you wonder, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Sometimes the most groundbreaking art comes from the most unexpected places.
Absolutely.
It's a good reminder to stay open to the possibilities, to never underestimate the power of raw talent and passion.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
But we're just scratching the surface of Paul Dyo's story. Stick with us as we delve deeper into his journey with Iron Maiden, their rise to fame, and his eventual departure from the band.
Looking forward to it.
There's a lot more to uncover.
It's amazing to think about those rough beginnings, you know? They actually led to something so iconic.
It really is. And we left off talking about that debut album, which just exploded onto the scene.
Yeah.
But they didn't just rest on their laurels.
No.
In 1981, they released their second album with Maiden and Killers.
Right.
This one really solidified their place as like a major force in the new wave of British heavy metal.
Totally.
What do you think made Killers stand out? And how did it build on what they started with their debut?
I think with Killers, you can hear the band kind of starting to stretch out musically, but without losing that raw edge.
Yeah.
The songwriting got more complex, the arrangements are more intricate, and Dyo's vocals had this newfound power and nuance.
Yeah, I'm thinking of tracks like Murders in the Rue Morgue.
Yeah.
There's a real storytelling element there, almost theatrical, which would become a big part of later Iron Maiden.
Exactly. You're starting to see hints of that epic storytelling that would become like a hallmark of their sound.
Right.
And lyrically, they're digging into darker, more theatrical themes.
Yeah.
It's like they were flexing their creative muscles, testing the limits of what heavy metal could be.
And it totally worked.
Yeah, it did.
Killers launched them to a whole new level of success.
For sure.
They were selling out huge venues, touring internationally, becoming one of the biggest names in heavy metal.
Yeah.
But then, as we know, things changed. Dyo left the band and Bruce Dickinson stepped in.
Right.
That was a massive turning point for Iron Maiden.
It was.
The New York Times article even points out the contrast between Dyo's raw style and Dickinson's more polished vocals.
Yeah.
What do you think about this transition? And how did it impact both Iron Maiden and Dyo's career?
Well, Diana's departure marked the end of an era, for sure.
Right.
And Dickinson's arrival ushered in a whole new chapter, brought Iron Maiden incredible success. I mean, his wider vocal range, that theatrical stage presence,
Yeah.
let them explore much more complex musical and lyrical themes.
Mm-hmm.
Their sound became more epic, more operatic.
Yeah.
But that's not to say that Diano's contribution was any less important.
Yeah.
He helped build the foundation of their success, establish that raw, rebellious energy, and connected with a core audience that craved that raw sound.
He was the voice of a generation.
Yeah.
It's for a certain segment of metal fans.
Oh, sure.
But as you said, Dyo didn't just disappear after leaving Iron Maiden.
Oh, right.
He kept making music, formed new bands, had a solo career.
Yeah.
He never stopped.
Never stopped, absolutely. He even just released a career retrospective album, The Book of the Beast, this past September. It's awesome to see that even after all these years, he was still so passionate about music.
Speaking of passion, the New York Times article mentions that Dyo struggled with some serious health issues in recent years.
Yeah, I remember reading that.
There's even a photo of him performing from a wheelchair. It's a pretty powerful image,
Yeah.
to keep performing despite those challenges.
It speaks volumes about his character. There's a defiance there, a refusal to let anything silence him. It's incredibly inspiring.
It really brings things full circle.
It does.
That image of him in a wheelchair takes me back to that story about him skipping school to see AC/DC.
Right.
It's like that same drive, that same passion for music was with him his entire life.
Yeah.
It's really remarkable.
It shows a real consistency of character.
Yeah.
No matter what life threw at him, he never lost that spark, that rebellious spirit that drew him to heavy metal in the first place.
Yeah.
His departure from Iron Maiden is really interesting, too.
Yeah.
Both the New York Times and his autobiography talk about how self-aware he was about his own limitations as a vocalist.
Uh-huh.
He said he didn't blame the band at all for wanting to go in a different direction. That's pretty unusual for the music industry, right?
Totally.
Yeah.
It's refreshing to see that kind of honesty and self-awareness, especially in a genre that's often known for, well, let's just say big personalities.
Right. Dyo was willing to admit his shortcomings and understand why the band made the decision they did.
Right.
That takes maturity and self-reflection, which you don't always see in the music world.
Yeah.
It makes you think he genuinely wanted to learn and grow, not just as a musician, but as a person.
For sure.
And he was really open in his autobiography about his struggles with addiction and the impact it had on his career and his life.
Yeah.
He doesn't shy away from the difficult stuff, and he talks about it all with a sense of acceptance.
Right.
It's a powerful message of resilience.
It's a good reminder that even rock stars are human, dealing with the same struggles we all face. His willingness to share his story, warts and all, is a testament to his courage and his desire to connect with people on a real level.
I think it's something a lot of people can relate to.
Yeah.
We all make mistakes. We all face challenges. And sometimes we need to hear stories like Dyo's to remind us that it's okay to not be perfect,
Right.
to stumble and fall, as long as we keep getting back up and trying again.
It's about the journey, not just the destination.
Exactly.
And even though Dyo's time with Iron Maiden was relatively short,
Yeah,
it had a massive impact both on the band and on heavy metal as a whole.
for sure.
But his story didn't end there.
No.
He kept making music, connecting with fans, and forging his own path, even when things got tough.
Absolutely.
It's inspiring, honestly.
It is. It shows that true success isn't just about achieving fame and fortune.
Right.
It's about staying true to yourself, pursuing your passions, and leaving a positive mark on the world.
Wow.
And Dyo definitely did that. We'll be back after a short break to reflect on the legacy of Paul Dyo and what his story can teach us about the power of music.
Stick with us. Welcome back to the show. Been on quite a journey with Paul Dyo, haven't we? From his early days in East London to those wild years with Iron Maiden and everything that came after. What stands out to you most about his story?
It's just remarkable how Dyo's story intertwines with the evolution of heavy metal itself. He embodied that raw, rebellious spirit that was at the heart of the genre's early days. Even though his time with Iron Maiden was relatively short, his influence continues to echo through the music today.
It really makes you realize that even a band as legendary as Iron Maiden started out rough around the edges. Dyo's gritty vocals and that punk-infused energy, they were essential to their early sound. Makes you wonder what he'd think of heavy metal today, with all the subgenres and different directions the music has taken.
It's a fascinating thought experiment, isn't it? Would he embrace the evolution of the genre? Or would he be a staunch defender of that raw, unfiltered sound that defined his era?
I like to think he'd appreciate both. His own solo work shows a willingness to experiment and evolve while staying true to his roots. Like there's that album Madman, where he really dives into a heavier, almost thrash metal sound.
Right.
But then you have albums like Nomad, where he explores more melodic and even acoustic elements.
Exactly. He was always pushing boundaries, which is really at the heart of his legacy, I think. He never let himself be confined by expectations or genres. He just made the music he wanted to make, and that authenticity shines through.
Yeah, it's that spirit of exploration, that willingness to embrace the unexpected. It's a reminder to never be afraid to experiment, to push your own boundaries, and to find your own unique voice.
And it's a reminder that music can be a powerful force for connection, even when it's rough around the edges. Dyo-now's music connected with people on a gut level, and that connection transcended musical styles or trends. It was about raw emotion, shared experiences, and a sense of belonging.
Yeah, it's amazing to think about the ripple effect he created. If a band like Iron Maiden, who went on to become absolute giants of metal, had such humble beginnings, what does that say about the potential out there in the world today? What amazing music is being made right now in garages and basements, just waiting to be discovered?
That's what's so exciting about music, isn't it? There's always something new to discover, some hidden gem waiting to be unearthed. Dyo-now's story reminds us to keep our ears open, be receptive to new sounds, and to never underestimate the power of raw talent and passion.
So to all our listeners out there, keep exploring, keep digging, and keep that rebellious spirit alive. The next Paul Dyo might be just around the corner. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive into the life and legacy of a true heavy metal pioneer.